all my paranormal misfits, and welcome to the Paranormal Misfit podcast. I am your host, Chrissy, and I'm here to talk about all things paranormal and spooky. From experience that I or someone else has had, to the shows, movies, and books, to lores and legends, and to the places known for the paranormal. I'm going to talk about all of it. I myself am a believer with a healthy set of skepticism. You'll hear my thoughts and feelings about different topics revolving around the paranormal, so cozy up with your favorite beverage of choice and listen along. Good evening, all my paranormal misfits. Welcome back to a new episode. I'm excited to be back and recording again after being on a hiatus for a few months. I'm feeling really rejuvenated and ready to start sharing some more spooky content again. So I have made some slight changes in how I'll be pushing out the content. So while the episodes are still posting every Friday at 5:55 p.m., the way I share the content will switch up. So like tonight I'm going to be talking about a horror movie I just checked out, and then next week I'll go into about a cryptid, and then after that, then week after that would be a haunted location or an item, and then I'll just keep to that kind of content sharing. So hopefully you guys enjoy the new schedule, and feel free to leave me a message on my IG for any feedback or anything you'd like to hear. So with that, let's go ahead and get on with this new episode of the podcast. I just recently got my subscription for Shudder, and I know I'm late to the game. Even the phlebotomist at my doctor's office while I was getting blood work done was like, "Are you kidding me? You haven't gotten it yet?" And I was like, I know. I heard all about it, and I just kind of slacked. So I got it, was rummaging through it, and I am a huge fan of the subgenre of the religious horror when it comes to horror movies. So there was one that caught my eye just based off of its cover. Its cover was like absolutely, I loved it. So anyway, so the movie is called Consecration, and it's from IFC, and it was released sometime this year. Um, like I said, the cover of the movie, the small trailer they give you, and the star is what actually brought me in because it's Jenna Malone, and I absolutely love her. However, once I actually started the movie, I had a really hard time trying to focus my attention to the movie. So basically, the gist or the very broad um, synopsis of the film is Jenna Malone plays a woman named Grace. She's an English girl whose brother, who happened to be a priest, dies under very suspicious circumstances at a convent in Scotland. And from there, she goes into, like the whole detective mode or whatnot, and lots of religious themes to it, obviously. And yeah. So, anyways, so he dies under suspicious circumstances. As she begins investigating, she has it was a hard time for me to try and figure, not a hard time for me to try and figure it out, but just watching, it was hard for me to figure out, was she having flashbacks or was she having visions? Because you couldn't really tell, right? And there was no explanation to them. So, there's a priest or a father played by Danny Huston, and he's, like helping her or whatever find the answers to her brother's death while he is there to consecrate the coven again, because there was two priests who died there. The mother superior of the coven is an absolute loon, straight out, and the sisters, the nuns themselves, are like they have these weird moments of just like fanatic hysteria. It feels like they go into, like, it's an ultra religious. All of a sudden, like, a wire flips in their head, and like then all of a sudden they're ultra religious and, trying to make her absolve her sins or whatever. So at one point you do get kind of a slight backstory on Grace. So you find out her and her brother's childhood was very traumatic. It was really abusive. The father went into like a religious, like ultra religious, very abusive kind of like demeanor. And he ends up, he locks them in cages. He ends up killing their mom. And while that kind of gives you like that backstory to why she kind of distrusts the church and, you know, learning that she was adopted, she wasn't, her and her brother weren't necessarily blood related, they were adopted. She was adopted at least. It doesn't really give you much more than that, right? So you're still sitting here and you're watching and you're going, well, what does that have to do with anything? Um, they share this journal her brother wrote, and it's written in a cryptic type of writing, which apparently was something between her and her brother that they used to do in childhood, and she's the only person who could really decipher it. Don't know. And then also later on in the movie, while she's doing research at the coven, you see a book that they bring out to her that has the same type of writing. I didn't catch on to it. I don't know. Like I said, this movie was really hard for me to follow. Um, so, anyways, on top of her having the flashbacks as a little girl, or on top of the flashbacks she has from her childhood, she also has these, and they're super random, made no sense. There's flashbacks that go all the way back to the Holy Crusades. And one of them is this little girl being carted, I guess, for sacrilege or sacrifice, or I don't know. Couldn't figure it out. They were calling her, I think they were calling her the devil. I don't know. Um, but see, adding that in there didn't tie anything together. And the backstory tied nothing together. And it was really hard. So at one point after multiple nuns have went a little Lulu, um, Grace was looked at as someone of interest in the death of a nun who tried to actually stab Grace, but somehow ended up stabbing herself. Like some unseen force you couldn't see flipped the knife around, and she ended up stabbing herself. So there's that. And this happens a lot, right? So every time Grace finds herself in a situation where she's almost being killed, that person ends up being killed by some unseen force that you don't see. And so the reason why her brother was at this particular coven was because he was researching for the truth of something. And it ends up being about a relic, an ancient relic. And um I guess this is where the brother ties Grace into being the relic. The nuns are trying to figure out where the relic is and is demanding him to tell them where it's at, and he won't tell them. And the it's you don't understand how or really like where the connection comes from. How is she a relic? And is she really a relic, or is she just like some sort of entity kind of thing? You know, is it a past life type of soul thing? Um, but the nuns, the father, all of them all believe that she is some sort of ancient relic. And with this, there's no real concrete connection other than her brother believes it, the nuns believe it, and in the end, the father does as well, right? So the storyline for me doesn't give a good explanation on anything, nothing. Like they followed all sorts of, like the horror religious tropes that they use in movies, the scare tactics of like cryptid messages, things flashing up in the background, spooky coven, distrust of religion. Um, so yeah, at the climax of the movie, right, is after Grace actually goes to a prison to speak with her abusive adoptive father. And the while she's doing that, the nuns and the father at the coven are getting ready to consecrate the grounds again. So that's happening. And Grace comes back to the coven. She's almost entombed. And um, as she's trying to come back out, some unseen force throws a very sharp, I don't know why it's on a sharp end, but a very sharp end with a cross on top through the father's back, and he dies, obviously. So After he's killed, all chaos ensues. Grace pieces together, and this is only from what I could truly tell from watching it, is that either she's a fallen angel or an angel of death. And it's really hard to tell because her brother believes she's a good person or a good, I don't know, something. Um, because there's like an angel always following her or whatnot. So she she throws her, so the coven is obviously it's in Scotland, so it's on a gorgeous piece of area, but it's also near a cliffside, right? And there's a particular area that the father was explaining to Grace while, she's like, I want to see where my brother died, kind of thing. And so he takes her to the spot. There's a gaping hole in the side of a very old brick wall that he explains that during the Crusades, when the knights came back to absolve themselves of their sins, they would take a step back for each sin that they committed. And if the amount of sins that they committed got them to the hole and off the cliff, it is their thought process was as long as they're absolved of their sins, God will save them and they will not die from falling off the cliff. Is that true or not? Have no fucking idea. Just saying. So, anyway, so she runs out to that point, right? And the random detective who you saw, I'd probably say a good like 15 to 20 minutes of this 90-minute movie, comes to try and find her and save her or whatever. And, she throws herself out of that hole. And as she's falling down the cliffside, she's having all sorts of either flashbacks or visions. And I'm having a hard time trying to figure out which it is. So, as you're watching, we're just going to call them visions. As you're watching the visions and she's reliving each vision, she herself at this point, before she threw herself off the cliff, so through her childhood, through her brother's death, through the night she found out her brother died, you see her as she is at that moment in time. You see her future self, which is technically her present self, while she's throwing herself off the cliff, and then her past self in whatever time period. And it's her that saves her. Does that make sense? That doesn't really make sense in my brain either, but that's essentially what happened. So, like, as she's a child and she's trying to save her brother from her father, when the mother's getting murdered, um, you see as the father's coming up the stairs ready to attack whoever, she as a child is hiding under the bed, and then you see the father die. Like, you don't see who kills him, but then finally at the end of the movie, you see that it's her adult version of herself at the current time period is the one that kills him. Same for each one of the nuns that tried to kill her. Same for the night her brother throws himself off the cliff, basically. Like, all of it. And through the process, they think the religious aspect thinks that she's evil. Her brother thinks that she's like more like an angel of mercy or maybe an angel of death. I can't really tell. There was no fucking explanation to it. And it was mind boggling and irritating all at the same time because I don't like insinuating certain things. So who knows? So as she's falling down, this is where she accepts her fate. And as the detective looks down below, he doesn't see a body. So obviously she must have been saved, but they can't find a body in the water. So it's insinuated that either she did or she didn't survive. Couldn't really tell. But at that point, it's insinuated that she most likely survived because the Mother Superior of the Coven is absolutely adamant that she survived. So after that, flash forward a little bit, I'd probably say like a month or two or something, and she's having dinner with one of her friends that she calls along the way. And, they're talking about her healing and her grieving and, kind of working through everything. And the Mother Superior tracks her down to some sort of street in, I'm going to guess it was England, and pulls a gun out and is about to shoot her. And she's staring at her, and the mother's staring at her, the Mother Superior staring at her, and then boom, she gets hit by a truck. Or is it a van? One or the other. But she She gets hit, she bends like a pretzel, and that's it. And that's how the movie ends. There's nothing like you get this little voiceover of, she still isn't really sure about something or some. It's so hard to. It was a really muddled movie and it had so much fucking potential. And I hate when movies do that to me. You start off with a really, you got good cast, you got good scenery, you're filming well, This was, make sure I have the director's name right. Christopher. Sorry, guys. Consecration movie. Pulling up my phone. I apologize. Christopher Smith, who did like Triangle, Creep, Severance, Black Death. Black Death I actually kind of liked. So he's a good director. But this one sucked. It did. Uh, you know, Scenery was gorgeous. Can't ever go wrong with the gorgeous countryside of fucking Scotland. Um, and while I'm not a religious person, the Catholic religion has some of the most gorgeous architect and imagery, and it always looks great in moody, moody lighting of filming. And that's what it was. This was a gorgeously located movie shot with a moody aesthetic that was absolutely fantastic. But what really killed this movie was its storyline, because you don't know, don't know, nothing ties together very well. I had super high hopes and it was a letdown. Like I said earlier, it follows the same religious horror tropes: the spooky covenant, the cryptid messaging, the religious fanatics, and obviously the people who are seen as holy being more evil than the person that they're assuming is evil, right? Um, Now I don't know if I'd ever watch it again, but if I do, it'd be more for background noise during like my nursing classes while I'm pushing out homework on the weekend or something, right? It's not something that I would sit down physically fucking watch and give all of my attention to, because it was hard for me to give my attention to it this go round. And this was my first time watching it. I think that if they tied the story, like her backstory, the weird flashback, I still don't even I don't know how it's still, you don't know why she is seen as something from the Crusades. Like, you don't know why, right? It never makes any sense. But if they found a way with all of these backstories and all of this, thought process, it would have been better if they tied it all together, but they just couldn't. I don't know whether it was just too many ideas at once. And they're like, oh, this sounds good, this sounds good, this sounds good, but you can't tie it together. She doesn't have the Grace doesn't have like some come to Jesus and all of a sudden she's into religion, or she doesn't have this like, oh, this is where, the church really fails and like, goes and follows down that route or anything like that. It doesn't do anything. It's just a very vague movie. Um but if they were to tie it together a lot better and give it more depth, I think it would be better. If you still want to check it out, like I said, I found it on Shudder, and it's, will I say it's like worth a watch? Nah. But I mean, I think everyone should try something once. But yeah, if you do check it out, please let me know what you thought about it, because I'm not conflicted on it. I just want to know if someone caught on to things that I just did not see, you know? Um, and yeah, that's pretty much it for what I got for this. So like I said, you can catch it out on Shudder. If you do check it out, please let me know what you thought about it. And if you have a movie or a show or something else you'd like me to review next, like, let me know on the IG, or you can send me an email at paranormalmisfitpod@gmail.com. And I'll tie all of this down into the show notes below. But yeah, that's pretty much my thought on the movie. Um, Pretty much my thought on the movie Consecrated. Consecration? Hold on. I am so sorry, guys. Consecration. Whew. Having a moment. So sorry. So yeah. You guys have a great night, okay?
Well, that concludes this episode of the Paranormal Misfits. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest, make sure you subscribe to this podcast on whichever platform you're listening to on. And give me a follow on Instagram at Paranormal Misfit. If you have your own spooky paranormal story you'd like to share or want to hear about a particular lore, place, or whatnot, please feel free to drop me a DM in Instagram. And on that note, I will catch you all later at the next episode, my ghouls.